Hey everybody, welcome to the Fired Up with CJ show. And I am fired up today because we are going to be looking at 4 generations at work and how to get them to work together. And we have author Hayden Shaw talking about his book, Sticking Points. And Hayden is actually a trainer that works with the author of Franklin Covey's best-selling workshop, Leading Across Generations and Working Across Generations. So welcome.
Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited. Do you know how many books I've read about millennials?
I don't know how many. It sounds from your tone of voice like it is more than a handful.
I've read, I think, about 6 books, and I know this book is not about millennials, but it is one of the best books that I've read about millennials, mostly because what it does is it helps me understand my own biases and how I can better really work with millennials, this is a fantastic book. I spent the whole morning talking to my husband about this book because I'm just so excited about this. It explains so much.
Well, I'm so glad you are. And the good news about it is a lot of people will say, I ended up talking to people in my family about it because it had lights come on. So for me, that's the most rewarding part of the whole experience.
Yeah. And I think it does that. It's about coming together, whether it's as a family or at work or just understanding, like, oh, that's why. And so in your book, you talk about 12 sticking points where when 4 generations collide together at work, they actually have 12 areas where they seem to not understand each other. Is that how you would how would you describe a sticking point?
Well, you've done a really good job about it. A sticking point is a place where we answer the same question differently and then are surprised that we answered it differently.
Okay, got it. So here are the 12 areas. Oh, or tell me
You
the
bet, please.
Yeah.
Here's just an example.
Yeah.
Should you wear flip-flops to a wedding? I just asked that question yesterday in British Columbia.
Yeah.
About a third of the room said, under no circumstances ever. About a third of the room said, well, it depends on the wedding. And about a third of the room said, I don't know what the big deal is.
So this is about attire to various formal occasions. And what was so interesting, I read this, you actually have a whole chapter in your book about dress code at work.
Dress code, right. Dress.
And I thought, what is the big deal about flip-flops? I don't really think this is an issue. And then I was walking to Starbucks today, and in came these gals from high school. It's about 40 degrees. It's freezing. I have my down puffy coat and 5 layers. And they're wearing flip-flops, all 3 of them. And I thought, are you kidding me? What are you wearing flip-flops for? You were right. I was shocked.
I live in Chicago, and you'll see people all the way till about Thanksgiving with the little pink toes commuting to work at about 32 degrees. And then somewhere around the 30s, people will start dropping the flip-flops. Most people are out of flip-flops and into boots. So boots in women have transformed how long flip-flops go.
Oh, yeah. Now it's a boot.
Now people will go to boots around, October. But before the boots came out, 4 or 5 years ago, dress boots. The Uggs, that's just a flashback to junior high for me, is the whole Ugg thing.
Yeah.
But anyway, dress boots. Before then, it was flip-flops till 30.
Yeah. It's just unbelievable that in Chicago they're wearing flip-flops. Okay. All right, so dress code is one. You have another 11. Communication is one area. Decision-making, feedback, fun, which I was surprised, this is even a category? Which I love that it is a category.
Well, the fact that I don't think it's a category, but my kids certainly think it's a category.
It's absolutely for my kids too. Yeah, that's the interesting thing. Okay, knowledge transfer, loyalty, meetings, policies, respect, training, and work ethic. These are the 12 areas where they're just different attitudinal beliefs.
We have different values.
Yeah,
different values. And so we often don't even realize that somebody else is going to give a different answer. And when they do, we roll our eyes.
Yeah. And I love, so you have 5 steps that lead through generational differences. So in your office, if you have these 12 areas where you have differences, you have 5 steps that lead people through these generational differences. Can you tell us what they are?
Well, the first one is we acknowledge it. And now I don't think generations are the end all be all. For example, I was out in your neck of the woods where people, when it gets 40, are putting on a down parka. here in Chicago, that's when we just put on a long sleeve shirt. But so I was there in Seattle at Boeing for Diversity Inclusion Days there, and head of Diversity Inclusion. In the Q&A time, he said, "Where do you think generations fits with all the other differences in terms of priority?" I said, "Well, I think it's a small lens compared to like styles, or some people poo-poo Myers-Briggs or other personality things, but they're just general differences in the way people process information. And then after that, gender." And then after that, ethnicity. And then after that, I'd put generation. So I'd put it like a lens this size, not a lens this size. And so part of it is just acknowledging it. Hey, I think this one's generational, instead of you're on my last nerve because you're a jerk. And as people go into the holidays, they will have plenty of opportunities to say, what is wrong with them?
Right.
I walk in to get my haircut. I finally was in the office in town today, so I got a haircut. And I walk in, and she goes, "Oh, I told her you were coming." I said, "What?" "Yeah, this woman in the chair. They were all getting ready to be around their families this holiday season. And they were like, what? Is it our fault the younger generation is like this?" Well, yes. Could you give me a little? I said, "Yes, it is."
Yes, it is.
And could you give me a little more specificity on what it is that you are complaining about? And so, that was literally 3 hours ago when I popped in to get a haircut.
And I think that that's really critical, because there's so many lenses. It could be generation. Like, what is the root cause for why we don't understand? Is it a cultural? Is it ethical? Is it ethnicity? Is it gender, or is it generational? And it can literally be. And what are those the 4 ones that you gave me? Those
are the 4 ones. You have a great memory. Those are the 4 ones that I gave. And there are other forms of of diversity that we have, and all of those come together and shape how we look at the world. And right. I know some folks that kind of see generations everywhere.
Right.
Oh, that must be because you're a millennial.
Right.
No, that's not. And wow, you went to a workshop and must be stopped. And so that becomes the problem with it, is people go to workshops and go, I got just enough just enough information to be dangerous.
Yes.
So the first of the 5 steps is acknowledge. And and one of my major goals, anytime I speak or write, is for people to say, oh, kind of like you were with your husband.
Yeah.
Oh, that's generational. It's not that or that or that only. There may be a blend of some things, but that's mainly generational. So let's acknowledge it as generational, which is a lot easier.
And when I was talking to my husband, he said, actually, it's a zeitgeist. Is that the word? He's like, it's societal, right? Generational is a different way of saying societal. There were societal changes that shaped that particular generation. So generation is not even like, you're young, I'm old. It's like, no, there are actually societal changes and exogenous things outside of things that were kind of changing us to be and creating us to be a certain way. So I think that that's the other thing, because
well, for example, let's talk about something that I mentioned yesterday in business and today waiting to get my haircut. And that was, why do my daughter-in-laws want to run things? And yesterday we were talking about, why do younger generations come in and seem entitled? Mm-hmm. Or somebody said, you don't have to work for stuff. I had to work for every last thing I got. Mm-hmm. Well, fairly simple. It was called, sociologists have called it for years, the deference pyramid. Who has to defer to whom? Who has to let who go first?
Oh,
who gets their way? And they have a fancy name for it, the deference pyramid. And until the boomers came along, younger people deferred to older people. Women deferred to men. Minorities deferred to majorities. And life was seniority. It was pecking order. It was all those words for it. Boomers came along and said, why, when we fought this big war, why shouldn't we, to quote Dr. King, live out the full meaning of our creed that all men are created equal? Why are we not living up to our standards? Why do we have this other set of rules? I said, and as a result, young people no longer defer to old people. And therefore, you deferred to your mother-in-law because you may have been frustrated with her, but you knew you would be considered a difficult person if you didn't.
Right. That was in your generation. Right. Yeah. That was the kind of protocol necessarily.
Yes. Whereas today I said, if your daughter's out with drinks with a friend, Her friends are going to go, I cannot believe your mother-in-law is like this. I would not put up with this. In other words, the social reinforcement is not you're the difficult one. You should get along with your mother-in-law. It is your mother-in-law is so over the top. I don't know how you live with her. And so the social reinforcement is, wow, she's the one with the problem. And so the woman cutting my hair is like, I want someone to kiss my butt. I kissed all the older people's butts all my life. And now I have to kiss my daughter-in-law's butts to keep the peace. Somebody needs to kiss my butt. These were her exact words.
I love it. So to acknowledge that there are differences and appreciating, because what you're saying is appreciating that, you know, she's like, I had to kiss my mother-in-law's butt, and that's the rules that I followed, so you have to follow that rule. Whereas the millennials like, nah, like that just seems unreasonable. So it's acknowledging that each of them has societal influences that make them different, which is your second step. And the third is agree on how to accommodate those different approaches. Like, you know, so this poor mother-in-law is like, so am I? Wait, how many butts do I have to kiss now?
That is it. And when I told her, I heard once from a guy who was frustrated that he had to kiss his boss's butt. And one of his colleagues at lunch said, you just put on enough chapstick that you don't touch the skin and you can keep your self-worth and dignity. I told her that and she didn't think it was that funny, but still cracks me up to this day. Anyway, yeah, so the first step is we acknowledge it.
Right.
Oh, wait, this is generational. The second step is, instead of fuming about the difference in generations and trying to figure out whose fault it is, this younger generation is like this, what was the society at the time that shaped them differently, that made it possible to say it doesn't make you a jerk if you don't defer to people older than you. And then, well, once we change all the rules, because society worked, for some people, not for everybody, of course, but it worked for some people fairly well. And now that we've changed the rules, we have to figure out how do we flex for all 4 generations, or in families, 5 generations, instead of say, as my mother did, wait your turn. We won't be around forever.
Right. Just wait till I die.
That's exactly that's what that ancient saying means.
Yes.
For centuries, we've handled it by going, I won't be around forever. Well, can you give me an ETA?
I think it's ETD, actually.
Exactly. Yeah. I said that to my mom, can you give me an ETA? Because your grandkids don't want to do it this way anymore.
Right,
and
exactly.
she looked at me and said, you have crossed the line. I usually think you're funny, but that's not funny. I said, I hope you're around for the next 20 years, but this isn't working.
Right. Yeah. So the flexing and then leveraging. So how can you apply the strengths of each of the different generations of the 4th step and resolving? Those are
About half the sticking points require resolving and the other half do not.
Okay, got
Sometimes flexing enough, but you can have 5 different meetings, one for each generation. What generation week is it? Oh, it's Extra Week. We'll just send in a report and roll our eyes when we do icebreaker.
Okay, so I actually want to talk about work ethic, because as you said, this is the one that is like the most divisive, right?
4 times more often than any other sticking point it comes up.
So let's go through your 5 steps and help everyone please understand why Gen X's aren't slackers and millennials.
No, wait, who said they weren't?
Well, maybe they probably admit that they're slackers. I don't even know. The one thing that I found fascinating from your book is that I actually think a lot of the things that people, now demonize millennials about, it's really about Gen X's. And because they're like the ignored, like they're the middle child that's ignored, we just haven't recognized that they were the ones who initiated these changes, not the millennials.
You, my friend, are on track. See, all those books you read on millennials are paying off.
Something's paying off. Okay, so work ethic. What is it that we have to acknowledge about work ethic?
Well, we have to acknowledge that we see it differently, and that demanding boomers, or sometimes eye-rolling boomers, are not messed up. The world is messed up, you workaholics. And with Xers, I don't know, they walk in, they want me to tell them how to do their projects. I know. I hear that all over the world. They want me to tell. I like
Oh,
if I
that's an
had time.
Xer thing. I thought it was a millennial thing. That's an
Well,
Xer thing too.
now that Xers are managing, they're like the millennials walk in and go, "Hey, how would you handle this or how would you do this?" It's like if I had time to explain it to you, I wouldn't have needed to hire you. I
Right.
hired you because I didn't have time to do it. And so, so the Xers then get a little frustrated, and the millennials are like, "I don't know what to do here," because the older generations looked at work as a steak and everything else as an appetizer or dessert. Millennials and Xers, they look at life as a waffle, and they're like, "You get one square, boss, and you're getting work syrup on the rest of my waffle.
Right.
So I'd like Friday afternoon off to make up for all the work syrup you've squeezed in the other three squares."
Exactly. And here's what the other thing about work ethic that I thought was like a light bulb that went off to me is that, and you mentioned this in your book, I thought, why are traditionalists even in here? How many people who are 70 or over are still working?
Right, right.
But the key point that you made is that these are the folks that created these great companies, right? They're the ones that laid the template that we're all like following mindlessly against their rule set, even though they're gone. They're not even in the company, but we're still following with their rule set, which I thought, wow, that's really interesting because, how many 70-year-old people are at work now? I mean, some of them
Only
maybe,
about less than 1%.
yeah, but it's their influence and how they think about
That is
stuff.
exactly right.
Okay,
Exactly
so
right.
I thought so that's why traditionalists their attitudes were like they had the best work ethic. It's kind of like, and I love the analysis that you said, they're in World War II where they're like we have to roll in, everyone has to pitch in, follow the authority and the expert. That's kind of the attitude
Yeah,
that they have.
yeah.
And then how did that translate to a work ethic for them?
Well, work ethic for them was really shaped by the farm. Even if they didn't grow up on a farm, they lived within the value system of the farm. They lived within that zeitgeist of the farm.
Mm-hmm.
And to quote your husband, and so the farming meant early to bed, early to rise. You come in. My father-in-law came in early for work because if you weren't early, you were late.
Yeah.
And you had to work when the factory was open.
Right.
In a steel mill, you can't take your work home with you. Hey, baby, don't go out in the garage. It is 1,200 degrees. This does not work. And so you have to go into work. Whereas today, so many people can work from home.
Yeah.
And certainly not everybody. Service industry, manufacturing. It's hard to have a physician do surgery from somewhere else, although technology is changing that.
Really? I'm scared.
Yeah. Yeah. And so literally, if you have a physician right there over you with his hands in a Galileo doing surgery, and it's actually the robot that's touching you while he's running it like a very expensive video game, how far are we from having a surgeon in another part of the country running that?
Wow, that's scary. Okay, so that's
just
baby boomers.
No power failures is all I
Yeah,
can
exactly. That's what I kept on thinking. All right, so Generation Xers, and I'm a Generation X, and I was laughing because when you're talking about how Generations Xers have to work so much harder because life was so much more competitive, because there were so many more people that you had to compete against and claw against and work really hard.
There were so many boomers. So here's the irony. The boomers were so big and Xers were small, but the boomers were like, boomers competed against each other for promotions and jobs.
Yes, yeah.
Xers compete against boomers.
Right. Right.
And so that's exactly right. They were like, you've clogged it all up. There's so many of you and you got promoted so young.
Right.
And you all do Botox and eat healthy now. And I have no idea. Boomers knew their boss smoked cigars, ate a lot of red
Right,
meat.
you're going to die soon enough.
You could hear the death rattle about 3 years before promotion came up. Stick around. Old Joe's not going to last much longer. But with the boomer and Botox, you have no idea how old they really are.
Yeah, exactly. Start eating some fat and sugar, please. Get out of here. Okay, so the Generation X, and I thought another thing that you pointed out about baby boomers is that and I have to cop to this one. Work is meaning. Work is life. It's the main, like you said, it's the entree. It's a steak. Like that's the reason my life exists is for work. And it's so different than for Gen X's. And I honestly didn't know that until reading this because who listens to Gen X's anyway? So I just didn't know because they're so small.
That's so funny you said that. That is just so funny you said that because Xers really don't get much attention.
They don't. I didn't even know. These poor Xers. They've been doing all this stuff I didn't even know, and I'm blaming it on these poor millennials. Okay, so Gen Xers, how do they think about work ethic?
Well, they think about work ethic. It's interesting. A third of them are just as workaholic as the baby boomers.
Mm-hmm.
As a matter of fact, Xers either have a lot of kids or none.
Mm-hmm.
So ironically, a third of all Xer women by 40 have not had any children yet.
Wow.
At 40 had not had kids. And the biggest reason was I don't have time to do what I need to do in my career and take care of kids the way I want to take care of them.
Right.
And ironically, the Xers are the parents of the second half of the millennials.
Okay,
Not the
got
first
it. Yes,
half. The
okay.
boomers, the second half, the boomers had the first half, the millennials. First half, the Xers had the second half, the millennials.
Okay.
Well, the Xers are so much smaller, and yet they had more kids. The second half, the millennials, is bigger. The smallest
Interesting.
generation had the most kids. So they either had none, so they wanted to be workaholics, or they had a bunch.
Like, how
And
much
so
is
it
a
was-
bunch? 3 or 4?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, often. And, the typical family is still, 1.5 kiddos,
Right.
but they had more than their size in order to be, because kids came back into fashion again.
Yeah.
When the Xers were being born, they're so small because we're scared. Horror films tell us what we're scared of as a society.
Right.
And we were scared of babies. Between
Right.
Rosemary's Baby, when the decline and birth started happening, and then little Chucky's in there, their toys are trying to cut your legs off. And then you got Damien, and if a child has 666 on a butt cheek, you know a nanny's going to die. And then it finally ends with Children of the Corn, which was a Stephen King flop. He never flopped because it had suddenly changed, and we now love kids and little baby on board decals, suction cups started.
Yeah. But there's a Pottery Barn Kids. Like, there's a special store just for kids.
Exactly. $700 strollers. That was more than my first
Exactly.
car. I think the plane I flew on had less stable materials than the strollers are made out of.
I think
And
you're
so-
absolutely right.
Exactly.
Okay, so then these baby boomers and Generation X's created these millennials, and what's their
So
work
the
ethic?
boomers worked really hard to compete. The Xers were all about work-life balance and reconfiguring things. And then some of them, a third of them, went off and worked really hard. And then some of them were like, no, we want a different kind of life. And then everybody else is in the middle trying to have babies and pay a mortgage, because everybody can talk about life balance until they procreate.
Mm-hmm.
And when you have a child and have to have a place to put them, it is amazing how much more you end up working.
Yeah, that's
Because
true.
the boss goes, hey, we need somebody to stay. I'll do it. I had a baby. I must now find money.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, so then we created I'm part of this phenomenon because I created a millennial and Gen X has created millennials. And what's their work ethic like?
Well, the millennials, it depends on where they're at in their life stage.
Mm-hmm.
Because emerging adulthood is the cutting edge of generational research. And I only mentioned about 3 pages worth in this first book.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're between, 18 and 27 or so, their work ethic is often, let me work hard and let me play hard, because there's a lot of freedom. They're really busy, typically really, really busy. And with a lot of different things going on, they're juggling in their life. As they get older, they tend to settle more into a pattern, and they still don't want work to take over. But 2007, the first time a survey came out that's been on for decades, and discovered that women were as interested in high demand jobs as men, only 1 percentage point difference for the first time ever. Women have always been about 15 percentage points lower in wanting a high demand job.
Interesting.
And so as they get married and have kiddos, they tend to do this lean in thing, but they'll often alternate the leaning in.
What's
A little
that
less
mean?
like, Sheryl Sandberg wrote that.
Yeah, no,
book,
I know
Leaning
lean in,
In.
but what does it mean to alternate lean in?
Well, their alternate is, her husband leaned in while he was still alive, and then she did the high demand job. Now it goes, baby, I'll do the next 5 years of work and you lean in, and then you take a shot at work and I'll lean in.
Yes.
And
no,
they
I actually hear
alternate.
that with people I coach. They do that. Yeah.
And they're alternating who gets to really push their career forward, because they know you can't both go at it that hard, and somebody has to lean in.
Right. Interesting. So they have a very different kind. So So now you have these four, well, traditionals aren't there, but their attitudes are there. So you have these four generations. You have these
Right.
workaholics, you have work and family makes a difference, and then you have these lean in, I'm going to play when I'm younger and then I'm going to work later. So what happens when they all have to flex?
Well, you can imagine there are some differences in opinion.
Yeah.
For example, one of my favorite stories is an executive in the Q&A time said, when a boomer's late for work, they call.
Hmm.
They give you all the details,
Yeah.
more
Sorry,
details
I'm
than you ever want.
late. Yeah. I
Here's
ran
what
into blah, blah,
happened.
blah, blah, blah.
Oh, and then they give you an action plan. So you have to go back through all the details again.
Right.
And then they promise to say 7 minutes late to make up the time.
Right.
And he said, now, after I'm hearing you, I'm wondering, should I back off my millennials? Because when they're 20 minutes late, they don't call. And when they walk in, they say hello and don't even have that look of I'm late, I acknowledge it look.
Right.
And they have a Starbucks. And so I don't know if I should be mad or if it's just generational. And so understanding that helps us flex.
Yeah.
And so I said, well, because here's the key idea in step 2 of appreciate. I know we're going back a bit here, but ask why. Why do they do that? Why does that make sense to them? Why, when you're late, do you? I said, so what do they say to you when you say you're late? They say, did I miss something? Is everything done? Did I forget something? No, it's all done. Oh, and they're like, oh, okay, good. No, good. You're still late. We started at 8:30.
Right.
Yeah, but I thought there was actual work that needed to be done. I had forgotten,
Right.
and so therefore I should have come in.
Yeah.
No, you should come in because we start. And what they point out is, what the younger generations point out is the millennial, or the boomers come in, they turn on their computer, then they go make coffee and talk for 15 minutes.
Right.
And then they start about 10 till. And as they point out, but they drink sucky coffee.
I'm
We
smart
start
enough to go to Starbucks and get it beforehand.
We start working at the same time, and you drink bad coffee and think you're superior. Who's the fool?
It's funny because I was reading this chapter. We had the cleaners come to clean our house before Thanksgiving, and we pay them to come for 3 hours. We have 2 of them come for 3 hours, and they're supposed to come at 9. One came at 9:15. One came at 9:30, and they're supposed to. We paid them for 3 hours, so I would expect one to leave at 12:15 and 12:30. They both left the door at 12, and I thought, I'm mad because I paid them for this time, but then
Right.
but then I thought, well, did they do the cleaning? Yes. Did they do it in a sufficient manner? Yes. So what are you mad about? Like they just were able to clean more effectively. I'm like, but I paid for 6 hours of cleaning.
Friend, you have just put into words
Yeah.
what people feel like. I'm paying for your time. Well, that is life on the farm and factory.
Right. But if you got they got the work done, our house is really clean. Yes, I paid them more. If they were smarter about the time and they worked their tail off during that time, those 2.5 or 2 whatever hours, then why do I care if I paid them for 3 hours?
Because those of us who grew up with an hourly mindset instead of a work product mindset, we default to that hourly.
Yeah.
It's funny because the people that clean our house, it's by the job. So if 3 of them come, they're done in an hour and a half. If one of them comes, it's like, you want lunch?
Right.
Because they're there for 5 hours.
Yeah.
And it's really about however long it takes. It's the same price.
Yeah.
And so as a result, we're like, really? We had plans for this afternoon. Let yourself out, Maria.
Right.
So she takes on from there.
Yeah.
Chicago has a lot of folks from Poland. They're wonderful Polish folks. They bring us great candy every Christmas. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
And
I
they're
thought,
like family after 20 years.
Yeah, I know. So I'm like, should I complain? I'm like, well, what are you going to complain about? Do you want like 45 minutes back? Like, what do you want? Like, I'm like, I don't know.
Would you like us to stir the water around your kitchen again? It's done.
So I definitely get this. So then
CJ, let me give it a quick application here for your listeners. Take Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
Should you allow Facebook at the office?
Yeah.
Well, see, those of us who think hourly, like you just illustrate, we think if I turn off Facebook, I'll get more work out of them. They're stealing from me.
Right.
The research is very mixed on that. Most of it tends to indicate that when you take off Facebook, people slow down how hard they work. Because they feel like your cleaning people I work faster in order to get the job done in a shorter amount of time. I made the choice to do something else for 15 minutes or a half hour, and then I knew I would have to work faster to get us on to the next place at 12.
Yep, that's exactly my son is 17 years old. And I'm like, are you going to write that paper? And he's like, I am writing. I'm like, why are you playing that video game? It's only 10 minutes. And I was like, well, why are you even interrupting your writing with a video game? And he said, because it's fun. That's like my reward for doing 40 minutes of hard work. And I thought, what? But I get it. I mean, that's literally how his generation works. And you have a whole chapter on fun. He needs to have fun. And it's unclear whether he's being more or less productive because I honestly haven't seen him working for 60 minutes straight.
He is 17. Honey, I think euphemistically you meant you worked for 20 and now you need a 10-minute break.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, so I don't know. I think it's just a different way. So how does one resolve this? So when you're in groups, right? So you talked about these 5 principles. How do they resolve it?
See, what happens is, with these illustrations you gave, the blood pressure goes up. A manager has people complaining to them, oh, I don't know why they're like this. They make me crazy. And the blood pressure goes up. And so we've got to relax this back part of the brain in order for the front part to kick on.
Yeah.
And so one of the ways we do that is we start talking about why people think the way they do rather than what. There are very few what's in the book that surprise people.
Right.
They've already heard the what's.
Right.
What they need are the whys so they can go, oh. And when they go, oh, they breathe out. This aggravated part of the brain relaxes. And this amazing thing happens. That's right. This amazing thing happens. This little patch of thinking that we have to work with up here, it kicks on. Mm-hmm. And groups get smarter. Their generational IQ goes up when they learn whys. That's why appreciation is such an important second step. Mm-hmm. If they're really, really tense, the second half is focus on the why and the common needs. Mm-hmm. We all want to get our work done as a common need. We all want to be taken seriously. We all want to work hard and be motivated, but we go about it differently. Mm-hmm. So common need helps relax us. And focusing on the whys help relax us. Mm-hmm. And that allows, it's almost like the old Star Trek, and thank goodness for TV land, because everybody of all generations has seen the first version of Star Trek, and they just remade it, so people are familiar with Beam Me Up. Mm-hmm. And it's like we get beamed. We're here, and then calm down. In step 3, we just kind of teleport to step 3. Well, wait, how about...
we become more creative because we're more resourceful because we're no longer in fear and worry and like
when this
judgment.
Part kicks on, that's right. This part can move from judgment and anxiety, and this part can kick on. It's almost like you just watch it click. Oh, wait. I almost called the book The Big Click because once it clicks, we relax. This turns on. People get smarter. So while there's 150 ideas in there of what you can do, the most important ideas are the ones you come up with
as a group
in your situation as a group,
right?
Because then it turns the sticking points that are dividing us into the things that stick us together. And that's the magic of using generational differences to make a team stronger.
Yeah, I love it. Okay. If only they could actually be doing this in DC right now. Okay, so that's my political comment. Okay.
Well, I do think they would need I think it would need to be stronger proof to deal with that. We need it on steroids, wouldn't we?
We would. So, and this actually goes into our second point, respect. Because everyone wants that desire to be respected at work.
You bet.
And so everyone has a different way of doing it. So traditionalists, I'll just touch on this quickly. They want hierarchy, right? It's kind of like a hierarchical, authoritative. That's how they're used to showing respect. Yes.
When they started, that's right. When they started in the workplace, when they were children, it was about finding your place in the hierarchy. That's exactly right.
Yeah. And then baby boomers are about education and hard work, and everyone gets a chance. It's all about fairness, that kind of stuff. What else am I missing about respect? What else do they want?
And no, I think you captured it.
Okay.
And speaking politically, this last election cycle is really about that shift.
I completely agree with you. In fact, when I talk to my husband, I'm like, this is really what this is all about, because you have baby boomers who are in the policy decision areas, and they're saying it's all about fairness. Everyone should have a voice. irrespective of the percentage that they represent of the community, right? And so you
Mhm.
had all these other folks who are like, oh, I'm a white man. I represent the largest percentage of the community, but you're telling me I have equal voice to, this Asian woman. It's like, that just doesn't seem right. Like, why is that the case? And finally, when I put the generational lens, I'm like, oh, wow, I get it now. I really got an insight about what happened in this election cycle when I read this part.
Because the boomers are dominating the conversation.
Yes.
We had um, um, candidates that were on the edge of boomer traditionalists,
Mm-hmm.
and so we had election about boomer issues,
Mm-hmm.
and
Absolutely.
in many ways it got older. Obama made it a younger, more postmodern, to use fancy philosophical language. And it actually went back a bit older with the two older candidates. So it's
Yes.
fascinating because, the younger candidate, when Obama kicked John McCain's butt,
Right.
because, here he is on a Blackberry, and McCain is saying, I've never done email. I have people who handle that for me.
Right.
And they just look like two, he looked much more out of touch.
Right.
And now it was the themes and values were very generational.
Right.
No
The
doubt about it when it
traditionalist
comes to
boomers.
respect.
Wow, that's really fascinating. Okay. So then, so in terms of respect, that anyone can work up their way up a position where they could earn respect, baby boomers. And then Gen X's respect those who have skills and deliver results rather than those who have official position. They don't care about authority. Frankly,
It's
it's what I
inner, yeah,
read.
it really is about who could, and part of it comes from families.
Yeah.
As families changed, there was only about 15% divorce as the boomers were growing up, and the Xers had a doubling of that to the 30% it is today. And so suddenly there's twice as many people, not everyone, but twice as many people who had either one parent or the other, and typically the mother. Father left, and it's like, well, moms had certain subjects they did at school, and dads had certain subjects. You wouldn't usually hear, go ask your mom about science, because
Right.
even if your mother had a great science mind, that wouldn't have been ladylike. So she would have taken 2 courses in cooking and not physics. It
Right.
just was
Right.
the way life went.
Yeah.
And so it was almost like we had these roles. And now the Xers are like, honey, I don't know science, but Aunt Sue was good in math. So why don't you call Aunt Sue?
Right.
So it's about who's got the chops, not who has the role.
Right.
And Xers were the group that actually grew up with the shifts in roles on many different fronts.
Right. Right. And so that's actually respect is given to the person who has the skills. I don't care if you're
Sure.
the VP of whatever. If you don't know what you're doing, I'm not going to listen to you.
So I'll be talking to IT people and I'll say, how many of you have ever had a boss that wants to weigh in on something they have no idea about? I start laughing. And, the bosses they respect are the bosses that say, hey, this is not my area. Never was. You two know more about it than anybody else in this company. What do you recommend?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's
They,
kind of
they actually earn their management chops by not acting like they have to have the answer.
right. Right. Whereas millennials are a slightly different, right? Everyone deserves respect. We're all equal. It's about fairness. We're all part of a circle working together. It's a very different kind of attitude about respect. And everyone has their own opinion. And it's funny because I'm a parent who has trained my child, and I send them to schools where they're trained this way, right? Where they talk about their feelings. The whole EQ thing was huge for my kids and when they were in preschool. And so
Right.
that's like, I want to know how you're feeling. Use your feeling words, right?
Can you imagine my old man saying, use your feeling words, Hayden? What he would say is, and he had a PhD in speech. He would say, children should be seen and not heard. Because the
Right.
old farm boy would come right out of him.
Right. Exactly. So here you have these again very different ways of respecting. Respecting is to be heard and understood, and respecting is to
Right.
follow order. I mean, it's very respecting a skill. So you have all these different ways.
No, that's exactly right. So for traditionalists, it's about your role in the hierarchy. For boomers, it's about earning your way up to a particular role. For Xers, it's about regardless of the role. And for millennials, it is hierarchy. It's about everyone. Respect is the air you breathe. Of course, different people have different skills, and we'll talk smack to each other. but everybody deserves a certain amount of respect. And really, you can dial down that whole hierarchy stuff.
Right.
And more than that, it comes with sitting at the table, and it relates to decision making.
Hmm.
So as I joke in engineering firms, you only had to sit at the card table at Thanksgiving for 7 years. And then you were allowed to sit at the big table, but you weren't allowed to say anything. And about 3 years after sitting there quietly, someone asked you your opinion, and you gave a quick answer. And then later on, were acknowledged whether or not you should talk. And somewhere around year 10, you could participate freely
Right.
at the big table with everybody, with all the rest of the engineers, because you have proven yourself.
Right. Right.
And so decision making ties so heavily. The sticking point of decision
Right.
making links so closely with how people get respect.
Yeah, and I think it's so interesting. In fact, in your chapter on decision making, I loved all these different ways of you talk about 6 different ways of making a decision. And I've experienced every single one of the boss decides and announces, here's our new policy about blah 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 blah. You cannot wear flip flops in the office. Done. I'm walking out. No discussion. That's it. It's like on a little memo someplace in the lunchroom. So that's one. The other is the boss asks all the employees for input and then decides, hey, I want to know what people think about flip flops. I want to hear different. I put a little thing where people can put their notes in the box on what they want with respect to flip flops. The boss asks more tenured employees for input and then decides, like, what do you guys think? What should we do about flip flops? Talk to your HR person, whatever. The boss and few employees meet and decide. Right, so we know what that's a different version of the number 3. The savviest person on the topic decides, and then the team talks it over and comes to consensus, or at least clear majority on a conclusion. If not, the boss or savviest person decides. So this kind of goes into exactly what you're talking about, and it's very hard, right? Because sometimes, like for some of these models, and you were suggesting that number 2, 5, and 6. So the boss asks all employees for input and then decides. The savviest person on the topic decides, or the team talks it over and comes to consensus is kind of the new management style, right? That's kind of the new way of doing it.
Well, it is, because that's how parenting's been for 20 years. Here's my theory.
Yeah.
My theory is, and I think you can demonstrate it. You go back and figure out what's in parenting books 20 years earlier, and that's management books today.
Yes, absolutely.
And
Go to
so
sleep,
since we
do this, mom said this, just do it. Don't argue with me, just do it.
Exactly. Whereas, so here's the amount of dialogue we had on our family vacation.
Yes.
My father would wake us up and say, get in the car. That was the sum total of dialogue.
Me too.
Yeah. Whereas we'd spend 2 months discussing where we were going to go and what we were going to do, and everybody would have an opinion.
Yeah.
And we would change it. I'd plan it all out. And then we would get on there and be, I don't feel like doing that. I have a plan. Wouldn't matter. Wouldn't matter. It was, all right, well, let's
I
talk
feel you.
about
I
what
have
we
a
want to do.
family too. Where are we going to go for Hawaii? Oh, I don't want to go to Maui. Oh, come on. You're like, you don't want to go to Maui? Shut up. Or like, I want to
Exactly.
go to Big Island instead. I'm like, oh, shut up. You're so privileged. Like, please. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I'm so sorry that you don't want to go to Maui. You poor little child.
I didn't see my friends. I'm like, oh, please. Be quiet. But then I'm like, okay, so how do we actually change a vacation so you can spend time with your friends and we can also go to Maui because family time is important? Like that conversation would have never happened, right?
Oh yeah.
With my family.
Well, exactly. And the whole interaction was different because somewhere around Chattanooga on our family vacations, my father would pull us out. My mom would give the high sign. He would pull us out of the car and begin to whoop us with his belt.
Oh yeah.
Because there was
I
a
had
line
the
in the
ruler.
back seat.
Mine was a
God.
ruler.
Yeah, because my old man would run it like John Wayne. He could get that whole belt off and up around his head with one arm in a single motion, like John Wayne in True Grit running that shotgun with one hand. It'd be up around his head, and America would be cheering him on. Today, if you wanted to spank your kid, you'd have to take him into bushes, like you were going to bury a body. But America would be honking because he was raising another good citizen.
So this whole way of decision making is very different, right? So, and it's interesting because I work with I can't say the name, but I work with an organization that's a
Hmm.
very old, traditional kind of organization, and they do have people in their 60s and 70s that work there. And so they'll get together as a team and say, so we're going to plan on doing this. I'd like to get everyone's input. And so the traditionalists, they don't say anything. And they said, I'm having a hard time getting these traditionalists to participate. They're like, why can't you just figure this out on your by yourself? Why do you need my help? And she's a Gen Xer, and she's saying, well, because I want everyone's point of view. She's like, why do you? And they're like, why do you need my point of view? Just get the work done. Why do we have to sit in these meetings? This is the traditionalist saying this.
No, it is so true. They're like, wow, wow. No, look, what I just had an 82-year-old say to me, don't you think China's going to kick our butt because we're soft? They're not soft. We're soft. This young generation, they can't do everything is a meeting. They've got to talk it over. They got to share their feelings. What is wrong with you? I mean, this is literally last week's lunch next to one of the old owners in the metals industry, and he's like, China's going to kick our butt." I said, "Well, because he thinks meetings are soft because just get the work done. You don't need feelings. Not everybody has to be happy. This isn't a beauty pageant.
Yep.
Doesn't matter. Calm down. Not everybody gets a trophy." He went on for 20 minutes without breathing.
Yeah. Well, what to tell those people? Because, and here's the thing that I said to my husband. I said, well, the interesting thing is that, there's always this issue with culture, right? Like you have a team culture, and you want to have a
Right.
team culture, and then you have some toxic person that comes in that doesn't represent the team's culture. And what you do
Right.
is you fire them, right? You just say, like, you don't fit our team culture, you're gone.
If
But
it's a
then
good week.
yeah, but then you have this, in this particular case, you have these millennials and in your mind, or Gen X's, or some combination that have these toxic attitudes. Well, you can't fire them because you have no staff. Like,
Here's what one person said to me. "I wouldn't want my kids working for me, so I hire other people's kids the same age, and they're just like my kids. I think we raised them this way."
yeah, no kidding.
Here's what he said. This is like 15 years ago. He said, "I think we'll just get more just like it."
Yes.
He said, "I'm going to sell." That was his strategy. His strategy was to sell his business.
Oh, brother.
I said, "Well, it's probably going to be valued 20% less if you don't have anybody that represents the new workforce or have anybody that represents your new customers." He went, "Hadn't thought of that.
Yeah.
I'm actually going to have to work with them." I
Yeah.
said, "Sorry."
Well, it's a business reality, right? One of the things that you have as your litmus test is whether you should flex or not depends on whether it's a business necessity. In order to succeed as a business, do you need to flex? Because unless you don't want to hire millennials and Gen X's and, sell your business for 20% less, or probably even less than that, frankly.
Probably even more, yes.
Yeah, like you're going to have to figure out some way of changing your work environment and your culture, because that's the reality of what is. If you could take a toxic person and there's just one person, then that's fine. But this is a case where every single person that walks through the door that's a millennial is going to have the same exact profile, right? Is that true?
Well, let me break it down for just a moment, because I
Yeah.
think this is a huge example. If one person's toxic, it's because there's a shared set of human values. We agree that this is a better way to run the team,
Right.
better way to make decisions, etc. The passive aggressive manipulative stuff you're doing, we don't like it.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to saying this generation has this set of values and therefore those values are toxic, that's a completely different animal.
That's a good
because
point.
That's a different animal, because then we're saying your entire generation is messed up.
Mm.
And to your earlier point, companies are Gen X, organizations are Gen X. There are very little boomer value systems or processes left. Xers ate the entire organization over the last 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
For the first 10 years, we called them slackers,
Mm-hmm.
complained about most of the same things we complained about with the millennials. And then we accommodated them because they were the workforce.
Right.
I'd like to wear Dockers. Okay. I'm not going to wear hose. Okay. I would like to work from home 2 days a week. You're crazy. 5 years later, Okay, we'll do a pilot. And then it was, hey, we need somebody to relocate here. My significant other just got a promotion. I can't go. Well, why are you complaining that you're not getting a promotion? I want a promotion. I just want one here.
Yeah.
That's not how we do it. You got to relocate 7 times in 10 years to get a promotion. With all the boomer stuff, the Xers just like stare back at, and organizations would go, you can't ask people to move 7 times. What kind of place are you? No one will stay.
Yeah.
So, in other words, we've literally become Xer organizations.
I find that hard to believe because I've talked to, I mean, I've worked with organizations. They're not extra organizations, I don't think, but I think
Well,
it's
it sounds like
coming.
that older organization is still somewhere between boomer and Xer and a bit stuck.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Interesting. But you're saying when you talk to, because you've worked with, 1,500, what did I see? 500, 1,500
1,500
businesses.
companies, organizations, yeah.
Yeah. So
And
this is,
so, what I say to the older generations is this is the new iOS,
hmm,
and your apps will not work right
hmm,
unless you update your iOS.
hmm, hmm.
I don't
And
know. I just,
yeah, they're probably like, what's an iOS?
well, no, hey, that's not true. That is not
Really?
true. 20% of
Okay.
traditionalists sleep with their phones.
I know. I sleep with my phone. I sleep with my phone, and I know what an iOS is.
But I think to step number 4, this is where leveraging comes in.
Hmm.
Hey, how do we leverage the strengths this younger generation has in communicating with our market, which is younger?
Hmm.
Hey, by the way, before the 72-year-old retires, what can we learn that help this firm or organization move through some really difficult times?
Hmm.
We've
Hmm.
not gone through that significant a difficult. A Great Recession wasn't fun, but we've not gone through. I wonder if we're going to keep the doors open.
Hmm.
What can we learn from how they weathered that will
Hmm.
give us the tensile strength? So we begin to actually mine or leverage the differences rather than in flex. We're just trying to internally get along. In
Hmm.
leveraging, we actually turn it into money. We make
Hmm.
money off the differences,
Hmm. Hmm. Like you were
but it
talking
takes those.
about, like in the example that you just gave about knowledge transfer. I love the idea, and it seems so obvious until I mean, I read it. I'm like, this is so obvious. Why aren't people doing this? Which is the knowledge transfer of the 72-year-old Boeing wing assembly dude who's now retiring, who needs to train the 20-year-old dude to do it.
Right.
Do a videotape that the kid could actually tape and you can see slowly, and that kid is going to love it. The 20-year-old will watch a YouTube. They have no problem. That's how they learned how to do everything is YouTube. But it just seems so there's some things in here that are kind of like, yeah, duh. Why haven't we thought about these? But I think it's a thing that you're talking about. We're kind of reptilian. We're kind of going into fear and not liking these changes, and we don't see the possibilities that are there.
Well, ironically, in this case, the frustration was with the boomers and the traditionalists. Why won't they write this down? We've asked them to write it down. They need to write it down.
Hmm.
Well, they were not write it down. They were not the
No.
FAQ generation. They were
Yeah.
listen to the stories from the older generations, sit at the card table, listen to the stories until you've demonstrated you know what to do with what you've learned. It was an oral culture.
Hmm.
Video taps into their oral transfer of knowledge.
Yeah. So it works
And
for both perfectly, I think. Yeah.
it does. It simply goes with an appreciation of the differences. We flex instead of having all these knowledge transfer people chasing boomers with a notepad going, write this down. Well, film them and have somebody transcribe it. Have an intern transcribe it for $10 an hour.
Yeah,
They'll learn a lot
absolutely.
about the business, and you will have it in writing.
Yeah, that's just a brilliant idea. It's so simple, but so just obvious. I don't know why we haven't thought of these things before, frankly.
You know what happens when we appreciate? Then it clicks. We get a big click and we go, if they like to tell stories and they like to watch videos, hmm, hmm, and we can flex right there.
Mm-hmm.
Once we appreciate, instead of going, what is wrong with you? We go, that's different.
Mm,
That's different than me.
yeah.
It's
How
not
can we
bad.
make all this work? Now we need to have you take these ideas and go to the White House and just see if we can get everyone to get united.
Well, we got to, they're a little bigger. The issues are a little bigger when they're on core emotional values, no doubt about it.
I love it. So we've been having Hayden Shaw talking about his book, Sticking Points, how to get 4 generations working together in the 12 places they come apart. I love it. These are just this. What I love about this book is that you really understand different perspectives, and you understand where your perspective is limited, and you understand how you can expand your perspective and the whys. And then it's very practical. I mean, there's just very practical things in here. And I can see how, as a group, you figure out what your sticking point is. You use this as a starting point, right? Because this may not explain everything, but this could provide a
Correct.
starting point where you can start a dialogue to better understand a particular issue within your organization. And then really it's just about the group then facilitates how to flex, resolve, and leverage. And in doing so, becomes way stronger. Don't you think? Do you find like afterwards they just are better, stronger culture as a result of going through these 5 steps?
Yes, because the sticking points are not so um, Washington, D.C. intense in values conflicts. They tend to be more manageable. And so when people talk about things that are less intense and they can calm down and begin to understand each other better, it leads to communication patterns that serve them through anything else they run into.
Mm-hmm.
And you know this from your coaching, that when people work through a conflict in a way that leaves a trail, that they go, we could redo that next time. We could completely rerun how we got through this conflict next time. They actually build their trust and build their cohesiveness. And this gives a way to practice dealing with any differences in any conflict, but in something that we can talk about openly, which is we still talk openly about generations. We're awkward talking about ethnicities. We're awkward talking about sexual orientation. We're awkward talking about gender differences. But with generations, people of all generations talk about other generations quite openly and don't have a sense of awkwardness about that. And therefore,
Mm.
we can run football terms. I'm from Chicago. We have a bad football team. You're from Seattle. I hate you. You can run through a hole in the football words. You see that hole and you go, hey, we could run right through here and make some progress with building a team by talking through these somewhat emotional issues and contain them, and then come up with some good solutions, and it'll serve us well for everything else we do as a
Right,
team.
because you have a process now that you can use over and over
Right.
again, even if it's a gender related issue. After you go through these 12, you now have like a starting point. You know how to start it, and you have to build up the trust as a team to be able to have those conversations. I love it.
That's the goal.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you so much.
It means so much to me that you're listening to the show and would love your support in any way by giving me comments below or to subscribe to the show or share the show with friends. Thank you again for your support. Love and blessings.